Welcome back to the Phresh Phix presented by Boss. I'm your host Landry Dunn, and I am here with the man who's been taking all these fire photos behind us, John P. Cherry. How are you doing today?
Doing very well, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. This is my first time meeting you. It's been a pleasure so far. So
Pleasure,
nice
man.
to meet you. I hope the feeling's been mutual.
Absolutely.
We just took a shot of Henny, so you know.
Yeah, you're my favorite person on this stage right now.
I appreciate that. Shout out to those Birkenstocks, man. Those are very fresh. I like those.
Pick you up a pair, folks. They still look good. There we go.
But let's get back to the movement. And you've taken all these beautiful photos, and we've used those as the backdrops to the performances that we've had and the interviews that I've had. So I want to thank you for being that vision and being the eyes to the protest. And you've really been able to capture emotion and the feelings behind the people in the movement. How long have you been doing the photography?
I've been doing photography since I was about 14. I'm 30 now. But I fell out of it for a while just pursuing other things, music, working dead-end jobs and all that stuff. And then I picked it back up about 4 years ago, started doing it commercially about 2.5 years ago, and it's been taking off. I would definitely say the content that's been produced from these protests has been probably my most popular works, but I think it's some of the stuff people connect with the most too.
And I think a lot of times artists themselves, during protests like this, they're the voice of the people, and they capture those moments. And a lot of times they do find their best work because of that emotion built up. You come from a biracial background, correct?
Yeah. My father was a white man, and my mother is the tiniest black woman you've ever seen in your life. And so it was always kind of growing up with these two worlds of influences, but then having brown skin and realizing that, you know, no matter which white neighborhood we moved into, you're still the only black kid there. You're the only chip in the cookie, as my mother used to say. And so it's interesting kind of growing up in that world, and then getting into photography too. A lot of that translates because, you know, I'm a big wildlife photographer, and I'm in the woods full of white dudes with cameras. You know, there's not a whole lot of us out there. So that's why I take that into like a mentorship level. I'm really big into wildlife conservation. I feel like that's something that people of all colors can appreciate, because it's all our world, and you can just take that as far as showing kids in their neighborhood like what kind of birds are around. All you gotta do is look up. You've got all this entertainment, you got all this beauty that's around you all the time, and so yeah, that's kind of what I've been about. And
that kind of reminds me of somebody that we spoke with earlier, Leo Braddock. He was up here talking about how we need to occupy space and how we belong in every space.
Yep.
I hear that you have a relationship with Leo.
Yeah. Leo, I would consider to be one of my mentors. He's taught me a lot, just about food and beverage world, about nonprofit world, about how to be kind of like a master of my race as well, and open up and to take up that space. You know, he's one of those people who's proud and completely unapologetic.
Yes.
Completely.
Yes.
I don't know what your interview was like, but it might have been a vibe you picked up.
Absolutely got that vibe from him, yes.
And he truly cares. He truly cares about the community. It's inspiring to watch. And, it's, without people like Leo in my life, photos like this would have never been possible. I never would have had the guts to get out there and stand with my back to the police, for a photo like that and face the crowd and, capture those moments. So. And
I love that, because that's really what I want to do with these interviews and with these talks, is to uncover areas of space that we're usually not in, and hear the stories behind those people occupying that space and how they got to be there, and knowing that you had a mentor leading you there is very powerful, and hopefully you can inspire other people and young biracial kids that are wanting to take up photography and show them an example of how you can occupy that space and what you can do with that photography. So kudos to you for doing that and being in the position that you're in right now. I heard through the wind that you had a very unique experience in these protests, and you were actually on both sides of the fence. You actually had some experience with the police, and they kind of accepted you in.
Yeah, so there was a day that it was the first day that the National Guard was ordered to roll into town, and they set up at the Edison Center in Old Louisville. And I saw that where they were set up, and so I drove in that direction, and I found the line of 3 Humvees just driving down the road, so I followed them back to the depot. And I parked pretty far away from it. I walked up to a few soldiers that were standing in the road and just asked them, like, how do I do a civilian ride-along? And they're like, we don't know, but you can go and ask this guy over here. So I'm asking around for this guy outside of the gates, and eventually I find someone who just walks me right in. Just this friendly, his name is Major Steve Martin, which he told me that. I was like, really, Steve Martin? You messing with me? But no, he wasn't messing with me. He walked me right in the gate. He was the National Guard chaplain. and they closed the gate behind me, and I was
Wow.
like in the belly of the beast. 400 National Guardsmen, 200 LMPD and KSP, Kentucky State Police, and it was
Wow.
like, you know, it's like being in a bat cave. It was wild. We walk in, and of course, you know, at first, and just to paint a bigger picture, I'm wearing like the shortest pair of cutoff jeans that I own, some tennis shoes and no socks, and a denim shirt that's buttoned down kind of about like this, and then I've got a camera bag. So I was completely out of place. I didn't look like press at all, and I'm not press, you know. And so I just kind of found the first group of guys that were all wearing camo, started talking to them, just asking them about, you know, what it was
Wow.
like.
And what was their vibe like? How were they feeling?
So the National Guard folks, a lot of them I talked to are from Louisville. Most of them are from Kentucky, if they're not from like Southern Ohio, Southern Indiana. And some of them live in my neighborhood. I live in the Highlands. Some of them like also live in the Highlands. Some of them were out protesting the week before they got
Really?
called.
Really?
The weekend before, I think they got called in like a Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday, and it was that previous weekend was when everything started.
That's
And
crazy.
yeah, one guy said, you know, it was so weird rolling up on, you know, past the Heine brothers. He used to ride his bike by all the time, and a
That's
lot of them
crazy.
didn't want to be out there. Most of them didn't want to be out there.
So they didn't want to be out there either.
No,
Wow.
because they don't want to roll in their own town with boots, combat boots and guns, and they don't want to beat up people they might possibly know. They're there, you know, they're there like, we're just here to support Louisville Metro any way that they need. Other than that, we really don't want to be here. A lot of them. It was a beautiful weekend that weekend too that I was with them. I guess it
Beautiful
was
weather-wise?
It was beautiful. Yeah, it was beautiful weather-wise. A lot of them wish they had been going fishing or like hanging out with their families or like being in their town, their own town.
So just like regular people, you know?
Just regular old people.
And I think that's a misconception. It's very hard to get away from that misconception, because just like they do for black people, they like to demonize the police and make the police look like they're always the bad guys. But mixed in the police force, there are also good police. And did you have experience with some good police?
There was one police officer who he was wearing he was completely out of uniform. He had his proper bottoms on. He was wearing riot gear, but then he had this shirt on with this big fat teddy bear on it that said, "I'm a hugger." And he was the biggest, meanest, baldest looking cop I've seen, but he had this big smile on his face, and I snapped a picture of him. And I thought about not even like posting it, because you know, I'm an artist activist, so there is a certain narrative that I'd like to push whenever I post pictures like this. That is like, we are in the middle of a fight. We're in the middle of kind of a war, and there's a concerted war effort that is going on underneath to change the systems that be, so that we can finally get out underneath this big fat thumb of white supremacy and all these years of oppression, and as Ja'Cory said, gain reparations.
Right.
And so seeing this guy and adding him to that narrative, it was something I struggled with, but I was like, you know, this guy, he actually looks like a friendly guy. And whenever he bought that shirt,
Yeah.
he probably had the purest intentions. He probably
Right.
wears it out, you know, around his neighborhood with his family. Probably got a lovely family. It's unfortunate that he's part of a system that I don't agree with, but that's what it is.
That kind of brings me to a video that I watched of Tupac earlier, and he was being interviewed. It was a very rare interview of Tupac because he had hair. He actually had a hairline. I was like, is this really Tupac? but they were asking him, because, you know, he's always been an activist and always had a lot of anti-police songs. And they were asking him, does he hate all cops? And he was like, no, I don't hate all cops. I hate bad cops. And he said, a lot of times people try to trap me into talking bad about all police, but it's not all police. I judge it on a case-by-case basis, just like I do any other human. And I thought that was very powerful, and that kind of reminds me of your experience that you've had with the police and the National Guard. And I think a lot of people need to just remember that they're regular people, like you're saying. They're just going to work and just trying to get their paycheck and just trying to live, and their job is to be out there enforcing. That's also a choice, and that's kind of where I struggle, because you do choose to work there.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of where I struggle personally, but I try not to demonize them all, because that just fills me with a lot of hate, and it just makes it hard for me to live. So I try to let that go, but sometimes, you know, it gets kind of hard.
Yeah, that
You know?
kind of hateful energy that a lot of us feel towards police, which I feel towards police too, even with the knowledge that I have, it's just kind of ingrained in a lot of us ever since we were little kids. Just like, what do you... And I think that's part of some of the trauma of being a brown and black person is those little things that are inundated in your head so that you can survive.
Exactly.
You have to survive by
Exactly.
hating police and avoiding police.
It's just
But,
like it's a
that
natural
energy,
defensive mechanism. Yeah.
But that energy, like, what could that go to otherwise?
Right.
You know, like, what's that being... I know, like I was always taught, like don't ever be alone with like white folks' kids. If something happens, it's going to come back on you. Don't be alone with a white woman that you don't know. You know, so how many times do you try to avoid that behavior? And like, what could you have been doing otherwise?
Right.
Like, where could you have been putting that energy instead of being afraid? You know, white woman gets in the elevator alone with you, and you're sitting there like, you know, waiting by the button, hoping to not be a threat, not wanting to take up that space. You know, it's just humans could have been at a different point of evolution 200 years ago if it wasn't for all of this.
Very true. The way that I look at it now is how you learn and you gain experience from other cultures, you know? And I think that's what America's supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about people from different backgrounds, the melting pot, coming together and joining forces and sharing differences and struggles and becoming better from that. And I think that's what it should be about. And I think that's what a lot of the top people in America are scared of. They don't want us to get together. They don't want us to mix. They don't want us to become stronger. Because when we become stronger, that's where we're at now. That's what you see in this picture. That's what you see in this picture is the melting pot and the different races being together and fighting against the establishments. And that's exactly what they don't want.
This picture probably scares the shit out of a lot of people.
Yes.
If I can swear on here, I didn't.
Go ahead.
It probably scares the crap out of a bunch of people, and because I mean that's exactly what you see. You see a lot of these face masks and stuff that people are wearing just a couple of months ago converted to a completely different use. There are people out there that are facing pepper bullets multiple times. If you are out on the front lines, you will see the same people out there on the front every single time, and they risk it all. And they're white, black, Hispanic, women, men, and everything in between. And we all do it together, and there's nothing more beautiful than that. There's nothing more beautiful than that beautiful riot song with all the flashbangs and stuff going on, and you see these cops with 13 grand worth of riot gear, each and every one of them, all moving a line forward, and you see all these people who are completely unafraid. They're not scared,
right? And
they're not numb. They're unafraid,
right?
And it's not being brave. It's unafraid completely, because we know that what we're doing is larger than our bodies, is larger than, you know, crying because of tear gas, or, you know, sneezing and puking because of the pepper spray. So,
right.
and you know, that's got to be scary to the folks that want to keep these systems in place.
Absolutely.
And it's important that people see that stuff too, because I think that I've been put in a very valuable position for me personally, because I'm not with any press. And I am a protester myself, so I can do stuff that other press photographers can't. I can go out there and actually help. I can go out there and chant. Press photographers can't chant.
I didn't know that.
I can go out there and offer triage. I've got a couple of friends that I drive out there that are medics, you know, and I can participate in that. I can participate in the supply chain for the movement itself, all the nonprofit work, because I'm not partial. I am partial. I'm partial to the movement. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's nice to be able to express myself with my art and use that to inspire people. And then now that a lot of this stuff has a lot of this material is reached an international stage.
Oh, really?
People have eyes on it. So one of these photos is actually going to be on the cover of the Kathy Marini newspaper, which is a Greek newspaper.
Wow, that was going to be my next question. It was going to be, did you have a plan for these pictures you're taking, or are you going to put them together in a collection, or?
Yeah, I've got a couple of collection ideas. One would be a gallery showing. And then the other is a 100 to 200 page photo book. And then I'll also be selling prints of all these materials as well, and whatever print type that you like, and I can price it out for anybody who wants one.
Okay.
And 20% of the profits from that are going to Children Shouldn't Hunger, Leo's nonprofit. So we just keep it all in the family.
Exactly.
You know?
Keep it all together. I love it.
And that's how, I mean, that's if you can take photos of this movement and then artfully compose them in a way that's impactful, and then you can sell the prints of that to people that find it impactful, and you can take the money from that and you can put it right back into what we're fighting for. Like,
that's what it's all about.
You almost don't even need me anymore.
Yeah, and that's why I want to thank Felix for putting this on. And this whole Phresh Phix is great, because it's connecting people with like minds that are ready to be voices for this movement, and getting them in front of people that might not have exposure to them before, and letting people connect in a way that they wouldn't be able to without it. So thank you, Felix, for the Phresh Phix. I think this is a very powerful thing that we're doing. And I want to thank you again for these photos that you provide and being that voice for the people. Has there been something specific that stood out for you that you've seen as part of these protests? Is like, man, this is beautiful. I love this. What has been your favorite thing that you've seen?
Yeah, so I think it was either on Brianna's birthday or it was the day after, where at the waterfront at the Great Lawn there were all the 2020 high school graduates, all marched. They all had a ceremony and then they all marched, and then they would stop and do the standard operating procedure of blocking all 4 intersections and then having folks in the middle with the bullhorns talking, and then march again, block an intersection, and then keep going. Well, at the same time all that was happening, because I was with all the graduates marching, I didn't realize that there was like a whole group of like 1,000 JCPS staff that was also marching. They were marching towards each other, and we all converged in the middle. And then we all marched down Jefferson Street until we got to the square, to the park where, in front of the Hall of Justice, where all of the main protesting is happening. There was already a group of like 2,000 people there. Wow. So we had this huge chanting group converge with another chanting group, and it was beautiful because these graduates that are showing that we're the youngest group of adults that there is in this city.
Right.
And they were the most powerful folks I've seen this entire time.
I love that.
Because it's the youngest of us that are the most at risk.
And what's great is because me and Jen, we watch a lot of TV. We watch a lot of competition shows. World of Dance is one of our favorite. And on World of Dance, they have a youth group, the juniors. And we watch the juniors, and they're great dancers. But listening to them talk and their stories, and the way they're able to express their feelings and emotions, they just seem like they're a lot more advanced than I was at that age. So hearing you talk about them in the protest and their energy that they had in the protest, it gives me a lot of hope for the future. And because me personally, I was worried that the youth was kind of distracted because they have cell phones, internet, everything to keep them away from things, but that's also a form of information for them.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
They can also learn a lot more and educate themselves in ways we weren't able to. So I love hearing stories about them using that energy and education for the good, and I love hearing that.
Yeah, they were, some of the most passionate diatribes that I've heard have been from 17, 18-year-old kids with the bullhorn out there, and it's stuff like they're speaking to a black experience that is like so deeply ingrained in them that it does not matter how old they are. There's like a certain wisdom that comes with having some of that teaching, growing up and seeing the world around you, and seeing that even though I had a white father, going around the neighborhoods that I was in, I speak just like my dad. My dad was a photographer too, amongst many other things. So I kind of follow in his footsteps along. But there's just one difference, is that he was a large white man and I am a large black man. And so there are times when I traverse the world in his footsteps, whenever that's not always appropriate, and it can get you into trouble. But there is that innate kind of knowledge that comes it's almost like salmon. Like salmon just swim upstream. It's like what they're born to do. They'll always swim upstream, and they'll always do that. They've always evolved to do that, and they even evolved through their lifetime. One of the only animals that actually change their form.
Wow, I didn't know
as they swim. And black folks do the same thing, but we are not destined to always do that.
True.
We've been good at it, but we don't have to do it anymore, and our kids don't have to do it anymore. So
it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Didn't know I learned something about salmon today. Didn't I?
Yeah, you never know. That's the thing. You get to learn a thing about birds or fish when you talk about this.
So moving forward, every movement has different levels to it. What would you like to see the next level to this Black Lives Matter movement that's going on in Louisville? What would you like to see that next level be?
Well, I think that we would like to see some justice for Breonna Taylor.
Define justice.
Justice means that we would like to see some charges brought to those 3 officers. We would ultimately like to see them tried and convicted. And even then, it still doesn't bring Breonna Taylor back.
Right.
It still doesn't take that trauma away from Kenneth Walker. It doesn't solve her family's issues. But if we can make it so that stuff never happens again, and put the people that are responsible away for it. And ultimately, I think the LMPD is pretty corrupt, and I think the whole thing's kind of fishy anyway. I don't want to get too conspiracy theory, but I think that entire operation was very intentional. I don't think that it was a mistake at all. I think that's something that needs to be addressed next.
I agree.
That I hope that all the FBI investigation kind of uncovers throughout this entire process. And then only after then can peace even really be considered. We'll be down there at the square every day.
I love it.
And all over town.
So for people that were people that are inspired by you and people that want to follow your photos, what's the best way for them to keep in contact with you?
Well, you can hop on my Instagram for daily posts, and sometimes I post pictures on my story of me cooking food and playing with my dogs. You can also go to my website, which is Cherry Tree Imagery, cherry, and then tree like a tree, and then imagery like photos. And that's where you can contact me if you want any work done, or if you want to buy a print, or if you just want to talk.
I love it. John Cherry, it's been a pleasure, man.
It's been my pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. Hey, this is Landry Dunn with Boss Presents The Phresh Phix signing off. Y'all have a good night.